started?
Yeah.
Wait a few minutes. They only have a half-hour presentation.
Oh,
So
so let's wait 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
No, let's just
Go.
make everyone sit down.
Make everyone sit down. Okay, everyone, sit down. All right. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon again. For those of you who weren't here this morning, I'll just briefly introduce myself before introducing these two colleagues. My name is Jonathan Rule. I'm an assistant professor of practice here at Taubman College, also an XR innovator, faculty XR innovator in residence at the university through the Center for Academic Innovation. And so today I have the pleasure of introducing our next speakers coming to us from the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom. To my left, we have Martin Andrews, and to my right, we have Antonino di Raimo. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Whew. All right. Let me quickly run through their accolades. Martin is the Associate Dean for Global Engagement and Education Partnership for the Faculty of Creative and Cultural Industries. It's a mouthful. Which takes him actually around the world, so he gets to travel a lot, which is nice. And he engages many different institutions of higher education. Through his work, Martin develops global engagement strategies, seeks new opportunities for international student experience and exchanges, as well as identifies global research and innovative educational initiatives and partnerships. In addition to being a RIBA registered architect, or Royal Institute of British Architects, very important, very classy, as well as an international AIA associate, Martin teaches and does research. For his teaching, he's been a studio tutor, and has also been awarded the Senior Fellow of Higher Education Academy in 2021. His research and professional doctorate in education work focuses on teaching and learning in architecture education, with specific focus on how architecture educators are taught skills for teaching and learning. So I think this is something that's very important, since I feel sometimes we fly by the seat of our pants. We're trained as architects, not as educators, usually. Antonino, over here on the right, is a reader in architecture at the Portsmouth School of Architecture, where he is also the research co-lead. Prior to moving to Portsmouth and the Portsmouth School of Architecture, he served as the Dean of Faculty of Architecture, Design, and Engineering from 2012 to 2017 at the Polish University, Tirana, where he also established the Innovation Factory Unit. He was the curator of the Albanian Pavilion at the Triennial in Milano. Design After Design was what the exhibition was called. He holds a PhD in architecture, composition, and theory from the University of Rome. And he is he also has authored books, Francois Roche, Heretical Mechanisms and Living Architecture in New Territories, as well as Mente, Corpo, Informazione per un grande dell'embodiment. Sorry. I could do the Spanish, but the Italian, it's tough. I know, you sent me you should have seen the first version he sent me. His current research concerns the notion of TID, or trauma-informed design, focusing on the relations between body and architecture space in light of the notion of traumatic memory and its tangible and intangible correlations with architecture design and practice. So today we'll have the pleasure of having them both present work, or the Center for Creative and Immersive Extended Realities, which is located in their home institution at the University of Portsmouth. It's quite an amazing facility and investment in extended reality. It's kind of an extended reality dream come true, I would say. It's packed wall to wall with the latest XR techs, and the space provides students and researchers, as well as the industry partners, a platform to come together and engage through this technology. And so they're going to be answering the question, but really, how does this technology begin to engage architecture? So I'm going to leave it up to both Martin and Antonino to unpack this, and without any further ado, I'll give it over to you guys.
Thank you so much. Just check the mic. Everything okay? Cool. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. So today we've got approximately 30 minutes where Antonino and I will talk about extended reality, and extended education, specifically to do with the connections that we've made in the Centre for Creative and Immersive Extended Reality. So we call it CCiXR. So for the rest of this presentation, we'll call it CCiXR, specifically with industry, learning, teaching, and research. I'll talk about this more in depth in a moment, but this is a relatively new proposal for us, a proposition. It's a set of facilities that everyone is getting used to. So this is an opportunity for us to showcase some of the work that's already been produced through our faculty and through the university using these facilities. So as John has already introduced, I'm the Associate Dean Global. That's the small reduced version that everyone can remember. And Antonino is Reader in Architecture. All of the imagery that you see in this presentation today has come from events and activities that have been done in CCiXR. Okay, so a little bit of context for you first of all. Okay, we are from the University of Portsmouth, about 90 minutes from London, south of England, nearly the most southern point of the United Kingdom. And this is really important, the institutional context for us is that we're an island. We're a peninsula. We're only actually connected to England via a motorway and a main road. If they weren't there, we'd be isolated. There are some citizens within Portsmouth who would actually like their own passport for Portsmouth. So there's an independence there. There's, as I said, island city, densely populated. On that small island of Portsmouth, there's about 240,000 people crammed in. And during term time, there's another 30,000 students that go on top of that. So I think Ann Arbor is about 120,000 people in total when there aren't students around. And there's a rich history of innovation and use of technology on the island, and that's maritime, that's military, that's also cultural as well. So we sort of like to think that the CCiXR facility is following that tradition that we've had on the island. In terms of, again, a bit of context for you, we're a city campus and we're spread out across the whole of Portsmouth. Okay, we've got 5 faculties. We've got technology, business and law, science and health, humanities and social sciences, and of course, we are live streaming, aren't we? The best faculty, which is the Faculty of Creative and Cultural Industries, which is where Antonino and I come from. So, our building is central to the city of Portsmouth. We're located within the Eldon building, and there are approximately 3,000 students within our faculty, 30,000 across the university, and about 300 staff within our faculty to look after those students. And as we zoom in through the different scales here, this is our building. In the old days, pre-2014, the different creative disciplines were spread all around the different campuses. But since 2014, we are all within one building, the Eldon building. So those creative disciplines work together. And within that building, there are 4 schools, departments, colleges, however you want to describe them, okay, including the best one, architecture and interior design altogether. I taught there for 20 years before moving up into the deanery. There's the School of Art, Design and Performance, which is fashion, textile design, graphic design, illustration, photography, manual, hand-driven professions. The School of Creative Technologies, which is cool and funky and includes things like games design, technology, music, user experience, AI, XR, undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD. And the 4th school, which is the School of Film, Media and Communication, which looks at TV, film, broadcasting, journalism, mass media and communication. And we like to think that what brings everyone together, because you think the tradition of our faculty is that we were dispersed across the city, there wasn't much opportunity to collaborate and work together. But we are now able, through the Centre for Creative and Immersive Extended Reality, CCiXR, is to get those schools, get the students, but also the staff members to work together. And as I said, we're a relatively new facility. We only opened on Star Wars Day on 2022, May the 4th. Be with you. That was probably a marketing thing, wasn't it? That they did that for. So investment approximately, I think it's more than this, but let's say £7 million, which is approximately $8.5 million. And it was funded by 3 different organisations, University of Portsmouth, of course, the United Kingdom government, but also something called SOLEP, which is Solent Local Enterprise Partnership. So we've put together a short video. It's probably only about a minute long. I expect the noise will be really quite high in terms of the speaking, but we're going to let Pippa and our colleague Alex just talk to you a little bit about what CCiXR was designed for.
Centre for Creative and Immersive XR, or CCiXR as we like to call it, will be opening at the University of Portsmouth in October 2021, bringing 12 immersive areas and amazing facilities to the university to work with industry, to work with our students, but also to help to lower that barrier to entry, because this kit is so expensive, it's so hard for businesses and artists to actually get a chance to experiment, to play with it, and to learn how it can help them. So it's really about enabling all different sectors to come in and get involved in the centre.
Games, film, television and broadcast are already established within cultural production, but the most exciting part for me is new ways to explore new ideas, try new challenges to try and and create content.
We'll go through, Alex, I think. Just move past. So, this facility was, I think, primarily established with that amount of investment coming in to connect the university to industry. So we've done quite a few projects in the past year or so with industry organisations, some of which are under non-disclosure agreements and we can't really talk about it, but we have worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company, we've worked with Nike, and most recently we've worked with BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. And most recently, the technology programme on BBC, called BBC Click, put forward a short programme which was called How Could Real and Virtual People Connect in the Metaverse? So, can real humans be sharing the metaverse with digital people? So, absolutely, it was a programme that was on primetime Saturday television, which is on the BBC 24 News, and it looks a bit about like this. So I'll just go through, and I'll show you the bit.
In the last few years, we've heard lots about the metaverse and how it's going to change our lives online. I've made several stories about it and the effect that it's going to have.
Yeah, but you had help.
I beg your pardon?
You had help for the likes of me, the trimmer, younger-looking virtual version of you that has helped with all of these stories on the telly.
Well, if you know so much about it, perhaps you'd like to explain what the metaverse actually is then.
My pleasure. If we think of the current internet as something that we look at, the metaverse is the next version of the net that we're inside, experiencing as a 3D avatar like this one.
So,
that's the broad
the
idea.
avatar,
It doesn't
but also
truly
the
exist
digital
yet.
reality behind the presenter was
games
produced in CCiXR using our equipment.
Offer us a glimpse
So the
of what
point
the
of the
metaverse
BBC
could be.
is, a bit like PBS, to educate
To pop concerts,
the population.
fashion shows,
So we're able to engage with these large organisations to use our kit to explain relatively technical things. So, we have 5 things within this facility which all work together with each other. We've got a virtual production, mixed reality studio with a SmartStage, and I know Ray's in the audience somewhere. There he is. So we've obviously talked a lot with your Jeremy Nelson from the XR Innovation Centre, because you've got one being built at the moment, I believe, that's hopefully open in July. We've also got this very large volumetric video studio. So it uses cameras and specialist equipment to capture 3D volumes. We've had people, we've had performers, we've had breakdancers, we've had rabbits, cats, dogs in there. And although that might sound a little bit strange, actually trying to accurately capture something that's incredibly hairy and furry takes a lot to do. And so far, this kit has been able to do that. We've also got an XR studio, okay? And just here, we have a roller coaster rider. We've got a 360 treadmill, obviously VR headsets and things like that. Although one of our colleagues, who's quite a large gentleman, broke the roller coaster rider recently, and we fixed it. Don't worry, it's fine. So we also have mocap. Mocap, motion capture at the University of Portsmouth, goes back a long, long time, but it was always done in a very, very small area, a very, very small classroom. Now we've got a really good cutting-edge facility there where we can capture performers' movements and others, and we can sync it with the other technologies that we've got within the CCiXR space. The Photogrammetry and Scanning Studio, this is one of our final year undergraduate in fashion and textile design students, showcasing her own wear. This is something that is photographed. This room has something like 276 cameras in it. You can get incredible detail. You can take this and then project the image of our student onto an actor who is in one of the other studios and then move them. So there's a real interaction between these different spaces. And I believe it's the first one like this in the UK. At one point, it was the first one in Europe, but now I think someone else has sort of done their own facility. And we've got down in the basement of our building that opened in September, music technology and sound studio. Now, all of these things allow our students to produce projects and become practice ready. That's one of the things Antonino will talk about in a moment, but that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on, is that ability to get our students into practice, into industry, or establishing their own businesses once they graduate from us, whether that's undergraduate or postgraduate. So that's fine, we've got all this kit. It costs a lot of money. It's sat on the second floor of our existing building in the Eldon building, and you all know where that is now because I've shown you all the maps. So what? Have we done anything with it, or is it just sat up there? So the next part of the presentation, before we move into the sort of architectural side, which Antonino will talk about, is looking at some of the projects that we've already done with colleagues, led by students, most recently. So this is back in 2016, so this predates the opening of CCiXR. But working with the technical director of CCiXR, Rachel Homewood, our colleague from Fashion and Textile Design, wanted to do something with a virtual catwalk. She wanted to put together a fashion film that showcased the work of the students, and you can see that up there. So this involved scanning, this involved high-resolution filming, and then putting everything together in Unreal Engine. So that's 2016. So that's relatively early stuff. Second project for Rachel, so we move on slightly. It's still fashion and textile design, but you can see in that 3-year period, the technology is improved. The imagery is a lot crisper. The recording of the student work is a lot better within this virtual world. So we then zoom forward. We come to, he says, trying to play it, the most recent fashion show by Rachel Homewood and her students, where they've gathered together the end-of-year portfolios of the students to create this virtual world, a virtual catwalk, to showcase their students. So again, this is using that kit that I've just showed you, that equipment that I've just showed you in CCiXR. So the thing that Rachel prides herself on is the fact that when her students go out into practice, when they go out into interview against other students from other art schools and other faculties, they're able to say, we can do this. This is very different from a 2D portfolio. So it helps with the employability of our students. We also have a colleague, Ted Turnbull, who has a lot of experience of game design. This is something that was put together to just challenge, it's called Rare Project, No Evil. And it investigates the impact, and I've put there sensory perception, but it's actually taking away the ability to see clearly so that it encourages video gamers to work together collaboratively. One sees, one doesn't see. Again, it's promoting that idea of getting our students to work together. Next project, which has quite a nice little story behind it. Again by Ted, produced by the British Army, for the British Army. So, if you want to drive a tank in Britain, what tends to happen is your instructor will give you the keys for the tank and say, go and learn. These things cost millions of pounds. What do you think happens when you get a young recruit in a tank that's worth a lot of money? You crash them. Don't tell anyone, it's a secret, okay? So, the idea behind Ted and the students that he worked with was to put together a simulator. So you've seen the roller coaster rider. Well, we've also got a simulator that the soldiers, the young soldiers, can sit in and practice before they're given the keys to go and drive the tanks. We've also done it with the Royal Navy for rigid hull inflatable boats where they learn to do stuff virtually before they actually go and get given the kit. And so far, they're saving a lot of money on insurance. Final project by Ted is the block mills. Now, the block mills was designed and constructed by Mark Isambard Brunel, who was Isambard Kingdom Brunel's father, if you've heard of that. This is a very, very fragile building, the block mills. Ted has gone in and scanned and produced this virtual curated museum where people can interact with the various bits within the block mills, the moving parts, find out about what goes on in there without actually damaging the fabric. Okay. And it sort of reminds me a little bit of some of the stuff that John Rule has done with his technology classes. So that's just a little overview of what's been done. Now, I'm very, very aware that we've been situated within Taubman College of Architecture, so it would be wrong of me and Antonino not to talk a little bit about the things that we're doing with digital technologies at the Portsmouth School of Architecture. So I'll just hand across to Antonino.
So, thank you, Martin. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to give you an overview about what's going on in our school, Portsmouth School of Architecture. Just a little bit of background. We are a very, very professional, practice-oriented school. We are very famous in the south of England for that. So you might regard this school as a conservative. Well, it's a conservative school because we are committed to educate students that after their graduation will be completely able to work within an architectural practice. So you can imagine how controversial at the beginning, when I have been joining this school, introducing a culture that you might call digital. I would prefer the word computational would be. The school has been developing research over the past, I would say, 10, 15 years, before being an extremely teaching institution, again with the focus on the practice. And as Martin said, in 2022, we have been seeing the growing of the CCiXR. So in the school, there is an interesting discussion about what the word extended might mean for us as an architect, as architects. Extended means a lot of different things, even if you ask to technicians that are working with that, sometimes they might have different understanding of these words. So for us, the real problem, as usual, is what that could imply for architecture and interior education and research. And as I said, one statement, we are a very, very collegial school. I am a co-research lead. Very interestingly, we have a teaching model which is always the source and the opportunity to have negotiations because we teach in 2 for every studio. And if you are more a researcher, like I am, you have to teach with a person who is in the practice. So this is a sort of negotiation, is a sort of rebalancing individuality of the tutors, and to put, again, the student at the center. Our statement, which is a sort of collegial idea, is that the school will be rooted within the intersection between computational and analog culture. We are really committed to reclaim that architecture as a phenomenon genuinely is a tangible thing, along with all the extended dimension that this new technology will imply. So at the moment, I would say we are the school which has been less involved with the XR. We are in a very interesting transitional move. Again, our idea is to reclaim the human agency, or if you like, the living agency within the architectural design process. So we work with the machine, but we are very aware that the machine is abstract, is not able to give meaning to architecture as we are as architects. So what we are going to do now is really kind of recovering the work developed mainly over the lockdown in many modules that we were delivering online as everybody. And we are trying now to develop all of this work, to import the work within an extended settings, and we still don't know what that will be. For instance, this is a work where basically we moved from the Isle of Wight to the Dolomite Mountains. Interestingly, we have been testing computational tools mainly to clash with the nature rather than architecture. This is another project we developed at the end of the lockdown in the Dolomite Mountains. Is an experimental idea for a new way to create an ecological cemetery. So of course there is a provocation in the way we can think about people getting into the soil and then at the end of their life cycle to become something which is contributing to the nature. But of course, a very interesting thing is that we always use computation as a formal tool in contexts that are historical. Why? Because we believe that clashing is very important in architecture. Creating a tension, a conflict, rather than being driven by the tool is extremely important. This is pre-XR study, is a student who was working on Rome. I was holding for a few years a studio on Rome, being Italian, as you can understand from my accent. And so basically all the effort has been to rebuild the model of the Roman Forum by using technology like point cloud and so on. And of course, the idea was also to use, in this case, an extended version of the context, not necessarily better than a traditional analysis, but a different one to test the project idea. A little bit of things that are happening now. We are very aware about the popularity that tools like AI is gaining in architecture, maybe mainly in the social network that in the reality. But we have students who are willing to engage. So this is a student from an architecture studio that this year is focusing on the Venice Lagoon, on the small islands. We are not working on Venice, which is an oversaturated architectural city. Rather, we are considering the small island. And so the idea here is to use the AI to reflect on the coupling between the human agency that I was mentioning earlier and the project. So basically, all the idea of this project is to force the AI, of course through lexicon, via words, and to deprive the AI of its authority. Of course, is a provocative statement. Okay, a little bit of some of going research projects that are happening in our school. There are, just one second, oh, sorry. There are, as we have seen, this is a colleague which is which started an interesting project of collecting all the, creating a digital memory of many buildings which are in Portsmouth Dockyard. This is the first one, and we are aiming to create a sort of digital archive for that. But very interestingly, there are also colleagues, many, especially from the interior. You might know that interior in the UK is extremely developed, which are using a digital scan of the interior to deconstruct again and to understand what the mix between digital and analog representation of the interior space might suggest within this new reflection. Of course, there was big emphasis on the dimension of interior because of the pandemic and therefore the time that we spend home. I'm going now to talk a little bit about a project that I started with two partners from criminology. This is something that we totally started in the lockdown. It was absolutely exciting. It's a project based on the notion of trauma-informed design that in the US is extremely popular. In the UK, it's mainly developed by criminologists. And basically, this is an attempt to establish arts and humanities methods to reflect on the notion of traumatic experience in the space. What you see here is just an extract from a dyadic interview made by a colleague of mine, Madeline, who is a criminologist. It's the story of this lady, Lynn. Lynn is a nickname, of course, who experienced prison because of a collection of abuses and experiences that are very shared among vulnerable people. So the idea of this project, the main scope is to be able in the future to understand how we can push architects and designers to be more empathic with the idea that architectural design could be more sensible to the individuals who often experience trauma in their life. So the methods that we are trying to develop is a transcription, not translation, of a dyadic interview. That transcription will go to the creation of an imaginary architectural setting. So the idea of trying to visualize using a sort of symbolic, allegoric architectural setting. And then very, very important for us, as you might know, scientists tell us that when trauma occurs, it's not held only in the mind as a memory, but is also held in the body, of course, and it always implies the idea of a space, the space where trauma occurred. So the idea is understanding through the narrative of an individual. Is an ongoing project. We are planning now to make more interview if some typology of traumatic spaces will emerge. And this will be the next step. We are almost ready to extend, I will use this word, the whole setting to a virtual environment. So this is just, these are really dirty drawings, let's call them that way. All the body that you see have been modeled, and they have been, we have been using character studios, software like that, and the idea of finding a posture for the body within the space, even by changing the body, has been taking a lot of time. These are just some wireframes to show you all the work, and this kind of work was really possible because of the, well, it's a paradox, because of the lockdown. This is a moment in which we were together through this conversation with criminologists, understanding a part of Lynn's story where she was abused in a corridor, and that was a very early attempt to create the 3D setting, maybe like a stage, maybe like a theater. That is another part of that setting, which is mainly insisting, again, scientists tell us that post-traumatic stress disorder basically create a deep sense of disengagement with the body of the others. So, and that is a first attempt to understand that typologies. I am using that word in a very not orthodox way. And what we are also trying to do is visualizing that settings and translating it into an architectural drawing as if the project would be built in the reality. And I leave to Martin for the conclusion.
Just check my mic's back on. Yeah. So we've seen there a series of projects that go back beyond CCiXR, that are in the process of CCiXR learning how it can work with students, industry. That sort of magical moment hopefully will happen in the future. But we don't want to forget where we came from, which is that art school background, which is that manual, which is that making by hand that we're well known for as an institution. So where we'll go in the future, we don't quite know yet. But if you do a trade show in a year and we come back, maybe we can tell you a bit more about those case studies.
He is self-inviting himself.
So if you're interested in some of the work that our colleagues have been doing, that we've shown today, we've got a podcast, Life Sold. If you want to look at cybersexualities, Dr. Trudy Barber gives a spicy 20-minute update about her research, which is really good. And we've also got Claire Bailey-Ross, not quite as spicy, but she's looking at how digital technologies can be used for the Museum of the Future. So you can find that on all good places. So we've got a conference, an XR conference, that's looking at all these things. What are we doing with XR in teaching and learning, in higher education, but also further education as well. We've got that in September, and we'd like to invite all of you to come along, maybe even present some work. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
So if there are any questions from the audience?
There is always some.
Thanks
We
so much.
didn't pay you for the question.
Yeah. No, this is amazing to see the work, and the two of you together kind of embody it seems the kind of practitioner and researcher that you're describing, which is, it's nice to see the kind of two together. I think the CCiXR as a space and as an institution is very intriguing, and it has been since we've started talking, because it's not something that I've ever heard of happening, and it's very distinct from what we're trying to do in building our own TV lab here. And I think generally in the States, in much of architectural academia, there's almost a taboo in kind of even linking too closely to industry, but to actually have industry partners using the same spaces and kind of filtering in and out is just provocative, and tank operator, all these kinds of things. And so I wonder if you could talk about how this kind of integration of industry into a space like CCiXR inflects the curriculum at your school, how it might draw certain types of students, how it impacts their work, things like this. Because again, I think it's very different from what we do here. So
that's a really, really good question. It's one that a lot of colleagues are asking at the University of Portsmouth in our faculty. It would be very, very easy for CCiXR to focus 100% on industry, bringing in money, commercialization, doing the projects that get a lot of good coverage, BBC and TV and things like that. The conversation that we're having, and it's one that's going to take a little bit of time, is not only looking at industry, but also looking at how does teaching, learning, and research fit into that. And it's a conversation that is going to develop more as we head towards that XR conference that I mentioned just now, because it is going to force people to have those conversations and to break down barriers. The worst possible thing for me as an sort of, you know, an educator, but also in the role that I am, which is an administrator as well, is that it is simply, CCiXR is simply used for bringing in money, because it's beyond that. If you look at some of, or if you listen to some of the things that Antonino and I have already talked about, those strong connections between our faculty and practice and industry, the strengths of CCiXR mean that our students can go into the workplace, set up their own businesses and make a difference. Because a lot of our students stay in Portsmouth, and it is an economically, socially deprived area. And a lot of our students are very engaged with citizenship and the local community. So being able to use this high tech to improve people's lives is the ultimate goal, I think. So I think, Antonino, you'd agree as well that we are looking at how it can be that special thing that links all of the different things together.
Well, I would add that in our university, not only in our school, one of the main strategic objective, let's say, has been really, because of the area, has been really the idea of doing academia to support local communities. And the support must be tangible, must not be happening only within 15 days of a workshop or of a studio. So there is this long perspective, which is scaring sometimes because it makes everything very slow, and there is always the need to share, to discuss with colleagues. So it's very interesting. In a way, the individuals might feel kind of, not able to, but on the other hand, that is measurable impact that we do in the surrounding reality through academia.
Any other questions from the audience?
Oh wow, hands.
1, 2, 3.
I wanted to smoke a cigarette.
Thank you very much for sharing with us all these amazing practices. And I think that my question is linked to the previous one. I'm interested about how do you disseminate and communicate the results, the outcomes, specifically of the research projects? I mean, I understand that there's a level of commitment and impact in the communities close, but in more academic, which formats, which is the way you socialize your outcomes?
The university is really, we just, in 2021, we submitted our research outputs to the REF, the Research Excellence Framework in the UK. And the School of Architecture this time made really a substantial contribution, so was absolutely great. So we use, and there is, in the REF, there is a lot about dissemination beyond the local community. So we write outputs, we try to publish in scientific journal, but we do exhibitions that are often considered a way to disseminate, and in some cases, not always, some of these projects are not yet shared. We also use web platforms according to the type of the project. We also have now the TV podcast, which is led by a colleague from the School of
Film, Media and Communication.
Film, Media, Communication.
Charlie,
I don't remember the name
Charlie
of the school.
Watts.
Yeah, and so that is also another way. And then there are also private networking with other colleagues from our schools that are international. That is also a vector to disseminate that.
So, and one of the conditions of the funding is that we go out around the world and we talk about what we're doing. So the 6,000 kilometre journey that we made over to you, this is spreading the word. So it is absolutely, it's about working with industry partners and saying, come and work with us. And what are the outputs practically that you can do, but there's also the science and the research that gets disseminated in the traditional way as well.
Did I hear you say that at some point there's an opportunity for instructors to co-teach a class between an academic and a practitioner? Is that? Can you tell me a little bit more about the in-classroom experience there?
Oh.
And basically the pros and cons of that model, what could go wrong, what could go right, et cetera.
Shall I do that? Okay.
I can.
Okay,
I am
you do it.
teaching with a practitioner. I've been always teaching. Well, it's really a very interesting protocol of negotiations, because normally at the beginning, I am more academic, more researcher. The practitioner I can select a practitioner in a way, and normally he will look at me working with you, never. But then I go there is a good idea, and how can I explain? This is really a constraint. The constraint is, after the end of all of this speculation, you need to get an architectural project, basically, sorry. You need to get an architectural project. And in the UK, having an architectural project means presenting a set of drawings that are extremely traditional with technological, environmental, structural implementations. That is unfortunately the...
it's not my fault. I didn't
It's
set
not
the
my
rules.
fault I'm Italian. It's that so-called the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, that they are setting the criteria. So you can make a graduate, you can graduate a student if he's able to bring that evidence. So in this negotiation then, there is always a very nice rebalancing. If you like, sometimes things can become even flat, but it's a good flatness, because who is advantaged is the student, who is the one who is looking for employment. And the practitioner then, I don't know, this year we are working on the lagoon. I am working with a landscape architect who has a background in geology. And his contribution on that point of view of making clear with the student the understanding of the complexity of the geology of the lagoon has been extremely important, while I am the one maybe talking more and supporting more the architectural speculation on that. That's the way we try to work. Again, it's an interesting process, as all the negotiations is full of opportunity and frustrations together, but you cannot have an apple without a worm if you want a genuine apple, so that's the way we work.
Thank you. Hi. My ask is about these new possibilities to think the architecture, and I want to ask you, what are the most common questions that architects now are asking to the artificial intelligence tools in your experience? What is the most popular questions?
I'll start with the one that I've been noticing most, and then Antonino can share. There's a particular view in architectural practice in the United Kingdom. Many architectural practitioners will have small practices where they work with small commercial clients or domestic clients, so domestic residential. So a lot of the practitioners I've been speaking to see CCiXR as an ability to sell a dream to a client, because you're able to walk a client through the spaces in AR with headset. We've got the digital stage. You can actually physically walk through a digital space, if you see what I mean. I think that's just scratching the surface of what this stuff is capable of. But for me, that's the most common thing that people are talking about. So like a media, marketing, commercial kind of tool. However,
well, I think as all the computational tools is extremely exciting. It produces images, so that can really be a sort of testosteronic push to your imagination. But again, I believe that without the human agency within the process, I don't believe that is really an architectural project. There are things that are related to architecture that are not necessarily visual. They are tactile, they have to do with materials, with smell. So there is a profound bodily experience that, of course, many of the tools, being visual, are completely neglecting, or maybe I'm wrong, are kind of limiting. So again, the problem is not say no, the problem is how you intersect them to enrich the architectural thinking. Instead of saying, okay, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, everybody was doing Voronoi. Then everybody was doing Grasshopper, then Houdini, and then unpredictable morphology, which are predictable because everybody knows that computer cannot produce random, it's a pseudo-random technically. Now we are in the stage of this new character on the stage of architectural conversation, which is artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence has a very interesting story, which is full of success and also failure. I mean, there are scientists who, there are two concepts of the strong artificial intelligence, those who believe and those who speak about the weak. Maybe rather than AI, we should talk about the amount of data that today could be employed in the architectural design, but that's another story. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
I agree.
Welcome.
We'll do it after, sorry. We're going to end it there. We're going to thank Antonino and Martin for the presentation, and I'm going to invite everybody, I'm getting a lot of background here, everybody over to the TV lab right after this, like 5 minutes to get over there, 10 minutes? Just walk over there, casually walk over there and see the next thing. Thank you.